The decline of the first-person shooter genre can kind of be just defined in 6 different factors. Now, don't you think it's really strange how the first-person genre used to be the king of the gaming industry, but now it seems to be struggling? And today we're going to be exploring the decline of first-person shooters and why, as a gaming collective, our tastes have changed. Today we're going to take a look at oversaturation, lack of innovation, and of course over-monetization, and much more. But let's explore why the once mighty and high first-person shooter genre appears to be waning. In the early 2000s, first-person shooter games dominated the gaming landscape. Titles like Call of Duty and Battlefield and Halo really set the standard for multiplayer shooters. However, over the past decade, we've definitely seen a significant shift in gaming trends. For example, Battle Royale. Games like Fortnite and PUBG introduced the Battle Royale format to millions of players, taking attention away from traditional first-person shooter titles. And I can't really see that disappearing anytime soon. You also have hero shooters, which are an evolution of first-person shooters, I guess. Overwatch popularized it, and it's where you choose your character with a unique ability, which is actually something that first-person shooters are trying to adopt slowly but surely, where you add a layer of strategy missing from the classical FPS genre. This evolution in preference just shows a desire for more dynamic and varied gameplay mechanics. And of course you've got oversaturation and boredom. The first-person shooter market has become so oversaturated, and every year we see a new release that offers something similar with minimal changes. Call of Duty, the poster child for lack of innovation, brings out annual releases with minor updates that have led to franchise fatigue. Players are bored with the repetitive nature because the games are basically the same every single year, just with a new coat of paint. There was a time where Call of Duty wanted to innovate with Advanced Warfare. Although it wasn't everyone's cup of tea, they were still branching out and trying new things. But it seems like in recent years they're really trying to play it safe and basically just release the same thing every year. And this constant influx of similar games being released just leads to boredom, and you can't even distinguish one game from another when you boil them down to it. And although Battlefield doesn't really bring out as many titles as Call of Duty does, there are some similar issues here with incremental improvements rather than just groundbreaking changes. Because destructible environments are not innovative anymore, games like The Finals are doing it very well, and it's not exactly a selling point anymore. And you can't forget the lack of innovation. Innovation has really kind of taken a back seat in recent first-person shooters. As I mentioned before, Call of Duty and Battlefield, both franchises that have stuck to their roots with little deviation, and I mean they are really stuck down there. And this is leading to a predictable and stale gameplay experience, where no matter what, if you're playing Modern Warfare 3 or if you're playing Call of Duty Cold War, you're basically playing the same thing. And with Overwatch, it initially innovated. For the first couple of years, it really tried to make sure that the gameplay experience felt really fresh. But in recent times, with the cancellation of its single-player mode and overall the mess that Overwatch has become with Overwatch 2, it's really struggled to maintain its freshness over recent years and has led a lot of players to just abandon the game entirely. And developers really seem to hesitate to take risks, and new titles often just feel like updates to pre-existing games. Monetization strategies have also contributed to the decline of first-person shooter games. And I actually have a whole video based around loot boxes, so if you want to go check that out, link will be in the description below, or there'll be a card up top. But microtransactions and loot boxes, less so loot boxes these days, they've kind of disappeared after Battlefront 2. Loot boxes are kind of a thing of the past at this point. If you do see them nowadays, they are completely cosmetic and they don't really add anything to the overall gameplay experience and make you better because you have a certain weapon. Most of the time nowadays they are completely cosmetic. It doesn't change the fact that they were an incremental part in developers pushing monetization into games. And now they can't do it one way, they're gonna try another. DLCs are kind of a thing of the past at this point and instead have been swapped out for battle passes, but again, it's an evolution of the monetization scheme. Constantly pushing paid content has made players feel like they need to spend more money to enjoy the full game. Because you're not experiencing everything that you need to in Call of Duty if you haven't got a Nicki Minaj skin. And it's really kind of sad because this focus on monetization over player experience has really kind of driven everyone away from their games. Nowadays we're kind of just seeing bare bones content, and back in the day with DLCs, developers and publishers had a paid obligation to give us good, consistent content. Comparing current first-person shooter games to their peak, there is definitely a noticeable drop in content. Earlier FPS titles like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 or Black Ops 1 or World at War offered extensive additions to the multiplayer, zombies or Spec Ops modes. Whereas in recent years, newer titles often launch with limited content and promising future updates that may or may not fulfill player expectations. And usually by the end of the game's life cycle, many people feel like that's just how the game should have been when it launched, because that's how it used to be. And players feel like they're paying more but getting less, and therefore it's just leading to frustration and overall feeling like we're cheated out of an entire experience. And there's also the factor of price point. Despite offering similar experiences, the price of FPS games has remained high. You're basically paying £60 for recycled content. Gamers are asked to pay premium prices for what feels like recycled content with minimal innovation, and most of the time is just with a new coat of paint. And it really brings this value into question, because can you justify paying for the same game every single year if it's basically the same thing? Now, kind of moving away from multiplayer first-person shooters, because I feel like I've done that to death, and so has everyone else on YouTube, you also have to look at the first-person shooter single-player side of things, because it's seen some varied success. Titles like DOOM and Portal and BioShock offer compelling stories and innovative gameplays for the time, keeping players engaged. And these games had so much love and care put into these titles, and they present interesting worlds and narratives that really set them apart from their multiplayer counterparts. Now, although I've said that, not every single first-person shooter single-player game does hit the mark, and this is quite evident. Now, there has kind of been a decline in single-player first-person shooter quality. Some games really still do capture the magic, but others just fall way beyond the mark. For example, Wolfenstein Youngblood and Far Cry 5 and 6, these games suffer from repetitive gameplay loops and uninspired world design, often just, again, repackaging everything that we've had before without changing too much apart from maybe a setting here or there. But then there are also franchises like Duke Nukem and Rage, specifically Rage 2, that lacked the innovation and passion that made earlier first-person shooters great. And you could even argue that Destiny and Halo 5 Guardians, even though they have multiplayer elements, they often feel like they're going through the motions without offering anything new to players. And these games highlight a lack of creativity and devotion to the games that they're creating, and ultimately contributing to the first-person shooter fatigue that we are all experiencing. In conclusion, the decline of the first-person shooter genre can kind of be just defined in 6 different factors: genre shifts, oversaturation, lack of innovation, over-monetization, bare-bones content, and high prices for games that are just basically recycled experiences. Now, while some first-person shooters do innovate and they do engage their audiences, many just don't hit the mark. And the FPS genre is really going to be defined by the developers. If they are willing to prioritize players and their engagement over profits and monetization, we might have something going there. But only time will really tell if first-person shooter games are really ready to reclaim their high and mighty glory that they once had. And so for that, we're just going to have to wait and see.